Hello dear students, my channel Rai Tutorials will cover all the biology chapters of classes 9 to 12. The chapters are covered in just one video in a short duration of time to reduce your time on each chapter. So without wasting any time, let's start the chapter. It's chapter 17 of NCERT Biology class 11, that is breathing and exchange of gases. The topics to be covered in this chapter would be respiratory organs, mechanism of breathing, exchange of gases, transport of gases, regulation of respiration and disorders of respiratory system. What is breathing? Breathing, let us first understand the topic which has to be taught. Breathing is just intake of oxygen and release of carbon dioxide. And respiration is intake of oxygen, intake of food, which will lead to the oxidation of food to provide energy, and release of carbon dioxide. Now, basically we have to study in this chapter is how the intake of oxygen is taken from the atmosphere, and then through the respiratory organs, how it is the gases are exchanged from the respiratory organ to the blood vessels, and from the blood vessels how they are traveling, and then the gases are exchanged between the blood vessels and the tissues, and back from the tissues to the respiratory organs for exhalation. Different living organisms like plants and animals have different respiratory organs. Like plants take in and out of the gases through special pores which are called as stomata, which are present on the surface of the leaf. Even in the older stems, we find small pores which are called as lenticels, which are formed due to the secondary growth over the years in the stem. If you talk of animals, the organisms belong to several phylums like as listed over here: Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Esculenthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, and Chordata. From Porifera till Annelida, they don't have any specialized respiratory system. So the organisms which belong to these phylum, they all respire through body wall or through their body surface. In case of organisms belonging to phylum Arthropoda, they may respire through small tubes which are called as trachea, which open up into holes called as spiracles. They may also respire through gills, which are specialized vascularized structures which help in the exchange of gases, like prawn and crayfish. Then we have organisms belonging to arthropoda. They may also respire through book lungs, example scorpions and spiders. We have mollusca. The organism belonging to phylum mollusca. They respire through the gills. Echinodermata, they have water vascular system, so the gases are moving along with the water when the water is moving in, and the waste gas is moved out through the water system. Phylum Chordata, I have not considered the whole classification, but if you consider the vertebrates, the Pisces have gills for exchange of gases. Amphibians, reptiles, aves and mammals, they have lungs for exchange of gases. Since humans belong to kingdom Mammalia, all humans respire through lungs. Let us see the respiratory system. The respiratory system starts with a nose. This nose opens into a tube-like structure which is pharynx, which is a common opening for the windpipe and the food pipe. This pharynx then opens into a cartilaginous structure which is called as larynx, which is also called as sound box. This is called as a sound box because it produces a sound. This larynx further opens up into tube-like, muscular tube-like structure which is called as trachea, which is supported by a C-shaped cartilaginous ring-like structure which you are seeing over here. This trachea divides into left and right lung, which are called as bronchus. If it further branches, they are called as secondary bronchus. If the secondary bronchus further branches, they are called as tertiary bronchus. And ultimately, they branch into the structures which are called as bronchioles. These bronchioles will terminate into bulb-like structure which is called as alveoli, or we can say sac-like structures which are called as alveoli. Each lung is surrounded by two membrane-like structure. The inner membrane is called as visceral pleura, and the outer membrane is called as parietal pleura. This this pleural membrane, in between the two pleural membranes, pleural fluid is filled, which actually allows easy movement of the two membranes over each other, and secondly, they allow the easy movement of the lungs while contraction and expansion. These lungs they are basically present in the thorax region. If we start from the head, body is divided into head, then thorax, then abdomen. So these lungs are present in the thoracic region, and these lungs are surrounded by vertebral column at the back, that is on the dorsal side, and in from the sides, when the ribs are coming, they are joining to the in front to the is bone like structure which is called as sternum, and at the base of the chest there is a muscular organ which is called as diaphragm. So if we see the structure, at the back we have vertebral column, in front on the sides we have the ribs, in front we have sternum, and at the base we have the diaphragm. So this is the basic structure of the human respiratory system. It starts with nose, pharynx, larynx, then followed by trachea, then bronchus, then bronchioles, and then alveoli. The alveoli are innervated with or surrounded by blood vessels for exchange of gases. That means the gases which are coming through the nose or through the nostrils, these gases should move into the blood vessels so that they can reach the tissues for the process of respiration. Mechanism of breathing. Mechanism of breathing means how the intake of air is taken in and how the air passes out of the respiratory organ. This is what we are going to learn in this heading. So the breathing is basically regulated by two types of muscles. One is intercostal muscles, which are present between the ribs. This dark brown you are seeing, this yellow portion is nothing but the intercostal muscles. In between the ribs we have intercostal muscles, and the second is diaphragm, which is a thin skeletal muscle present at the base of the chest. So the atmospheric, generally the air moves from high pressure to the low pressure. So that means if air has to enter into the lungs, the pressure inside the lungs should be low. So therefore, if atmospheric pressure is 760 mm of Hg, so what will happen when the mechanism is like that if intercostal muscles will contract, if the intercostal muscles are contracting, this diaphragm, which normally remains in a dome-shaped structure like this, curved structure, it is pulled down and therefore it contracts, because of which the volume of the thorax actually is increased. If the volume is increased, the pressure of the air decreases inside the lungs. If a pressure decreases, so from the atmospheric pressure, the air enters into the lung. So this is how is the mechanism. That means when the intercostal muscles contract, diaphragm is pulled down at the same time. The volume of the thorax is increased, because of which the pressure of the air inside the lungs decreases, and air enters from the atmosphere, it enters into the lungs. Exhalation process: when the intercostal muscle relaxes, the diaphragm comes back to its own dome-shaped position. The, the volume of the thorax, because of which the volume of the thorax decreases. When the volume of the thorax decreases, the pressure increases. When the pressure is more, that means the pressure becomes more than the atmospheric pressure. Therefore, the air from the lungs moves out of into the atmosphere. Let us see what are the basic volumes, in what volume the lungs take in the air and exhale out the air. The first is your tidal volume. Tidal volume, it is the volume of air which you inspire normally. Normal breathing. That means you are normally inspiring and you are normally expiring. So that volume, that is called as tidal volume, that amounts to 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume would be the volume which you are inspiring forcibly after normal inspiration, and that's amount to 2500 ml to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume, it is the additional volume of air which a person expires forcibly after normal expiration, and this amounts to 1000 ml to 1100 ml. Residual volume, even if you are forcibly expiring, some amount of air is left inside your lungs, so that is called as residual volume, that is amounts to 1100 ml to 1200 ml. Now, depending upon these volumes, you can calculate the inspiratory capacity. That means the capacity of your lungs to inspire or inhale air. How much you can inhale air? So, one, you can not what you can inhale normally, and secondly, what you are inhaling forcibly. So it is the tidal volume, tidal which you have inspired, normally inspired, plus whatever you have forcibly inspired. Expiratory capacity, that means normal expiration followed by the forcible expiration. So it is TV plus ERV. Functional residual capacity, volume of air that will remain in the lungs after normal expiration. Normally you have expired. Now what is left in your lungs would be ERV plus the residue. Forcibly what you have expired, that is there in your this thing, plus the residual which will be always remain in your lungs. So that is the volume which will be left because you have normally expired. So that volume has left. So TV is not included in this. It is only whatever you have in expired, which you have not expired actually, that remains in your lungs would be ERV plus RV. Vital capacity is the maximum amount of air that can be inhaled or exhaled during a respiratory cycle. One respiratory cycle will include your normal inspiration plus your forcible inspiration plus your this yeah, normal expiration followed by your forcible expiration. So that is your vital capacity. And total lung capacity would be your total volume of air that can be accommodated in the lungs at the end of forced inspiration. So that will include vital capacity plus residual capacity also. This is the diagrammatic view. It is a if you want to measure the inspiratory and expiratory volume, the name of the instrument is a spirometer, by which you can see the graph and assume you can check the volumes of inspiratory and expiratory volumes through an instrument which is called as a spirometer. If you see this graph is showing normal inspiration followed by normal expiration, normal inspiration, followed when you normally breathe, then it is normal inspiration, normal expiration, normal inspiration, normal expiration, like this. Sometimes you take air forcibly, so it is for normal inspiration, then you have forcibly what you have taken, so it is inspiratory reserve volume. Then it coming to the normal, you have a normal expiration followed by forcible expiration. So this is ERV, that is expiratory reserve volume, and then you are normally breathing, that is tidal inspired, then normal expiration, normally inspired, then expired. Now, how exchange of gases occurs? I told you before that the movement of air will take place depending upon the pressure which is exerted by the gases. If a pressure is high outside, it will, and inside the respiratory organ it is low. So the movement of air will occur from high to low pressure. That means from the atmospheric pressure it will enter into your respiratory organ. But since we are mainly concerned with out of the mixture of gases, we are concerned with the oxygen and carbon dioxide, because oxygen is used up during the process of respiration to yield energy, and carbon dioxide is the byproduct of the respiration which is exhaled out. So we are concerned with these pressures of the gases, that is PO2, that is partial pressure. Partial pressure is the pressure exerted by each gas in a mixture of gases. So this is the partial pressure, that means the pressure which is exerted by oxygen in a mixture of gases in the atmosphere, and that is equal to 159. And if you talk of the lungs, this is the alveoli portion which is being shown. So if you see inside the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 mm of Hg. Outside it is 159 and inside it is 104. So the air will move from outside to inside. That means the oxygen will move from outside to inside of the lungs. Now, if you see in the oxygenated blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is 95 mm of Hg. Inside the respiratory organ, you had 104 mm of Hg. So what happens? The oxygen will move from the alveoli or the lungs into the oxygenated, into the systemic arteries carrying the or into the blood vessels, and from these blood vessels it will enter into the tissues where the partial pressure is just 40 mm of Hg. So from 95 it is moving from 40 mm of Hg where oxygen is utilized and then carbon dioxide is released. The carbon dioxide, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide inside the tissues is 45 mm of Hg, whereas in deoxygenated blood it is 40 mm of Hg. So the movement of carbon dioxide will take place from the tissues into the deoxygenated blood and then back into the alveoli, because in the deoxygenated blood it is 45 mm of Hg and inside your respiratory organ it is 40 mm of Hg. So from 45 to 40 mm of Hg it will move and then this carbon dioxide will be expired out. If you see the exchange, the movement of the oxygen or carbon dioxide or the gases will depend upon various factors, and one of the factors is the membrane which is present between the blood vessels and the alveoli. If you see this structure, the alveoli is lined with thin epithelial membrane, that is followed by a basement membrane, and that is followed by the endothelial lining which is lining the blood vessels. But if you calculate the total thickness of these three layers from which the gases are passing into the blood vessel, it is approximately less than 1 millimeter of mm, that is 0.2 millimeters. Hence it is very much suitable for diffusion of gases. Now, when the oxygen is moving in, is exchanged in the or it is transported into the blood vessels, it is not it is not just moving just like that. About 97% of oxygen combined with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. So 97% of the oxygen is moving as oxyhemoglobin and 3% is moving as a dissolved form in the plasma. Similarly, when carbon dioxide is moving in the deoxygenated blood, it is not moving just like that. It is moving as a part of something. That means when it comes to the blood vessels, it first it reacts with the carbon dioxide, reacts with the water to form bicarbonate, which dissociates into H plus and bicarbonate. This increases the H plus concentration. If H plus concentration is increased, that means acidity is increased, so therefore the pH is gone down. So this carbon dioxide will react with the water which is present inside the RBC in presence of an enzyme carbonic anhydrase to form bicarbonate, which further dissociates in presence of an enzyme into H plus and bicarbonate. This reaction is a fast reaction because as it occurs in presence of an enzyme which is present inside the red blood cells, which is carbonic anhydrase. Even the carbon dioxide reacts with the water which is present in the plasma to form bicarbonate, which further dissociates into H plus and bicarbonate. But this formation of bicarbonate is a slow reaction because it does not occur in presence of an enzyme which is called as carbonic anhydrase. About 20 to 25% of the carbon dioxide, it reacts with the free amino group of the hemoglobin to form carb amino hemoglobin, which dissociates into H plus and carb amino heme. Rest 7% of the carbon dioxide is moving in the dissolved form in the plasma. So this is how the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs through the blood vessels. In these forms, oxygen is traveling as 97% oxygen is traveling as oxyhemoglobin, rest 3% is in dissolved form, whereas carbon dioxide 70% is traveling as a bicarbonate form and 20 to 25% as carb amino hemoglobin form and rest 7% in the dissolved form in the plasma. Now, this is an oxygen dissociation curve. Oxygen dissociation curve, this graph is this oxygen dissociation curve is basically a graph between the partial pressure of oxygen and the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. So as you can see, this graph is showing a sigmoidal shape. That means after a certain stretch of time, even if the partial pressure of oxygen is increasing, the percentage saturation will remain the same. This dark blue line is showing the normal uh, graph. Okay. Now, if you see the inside the lungs, if you see, it is 104 mm of the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 mm of Hg. At this partial pressure, the percentage saturation is almost 97 to 98%. And this 97, this if you see this and if even it at 50%, if you see the percentage saturation by the hemoglobin is almost 82 to 85%. This is due to the positive cooperativity. That's how, because if you see the structure of the hemoglobin, the structure of hemoglobin contains two alpha chains, alpha 1 and alpha 2, and it has two beta chains, that is beta 1 and beta 2. When one molecule of oxygen, so that means one hemoglobin is capable of binding 4 oxygen at a time, and when one binds at one position, if the oxygen binds, it it increases the affinity of the second oxygen for its binding at the second position, likewise at the third and the fourth position. So quickly all the oxygen, 4 oxygen binds to the single molecule of hemoglobin. That is why even if the partial pressure is low, the saturation of hemoglobin becomes high. Now, this graph may either shift towards the right or towards the left. If it shifts towards the right, it is called as Bohr effect. If it shifts towards the left, it is called as Halpern effect. If this is moving towards the right, that means the affinity, if we see the graph, the affinity for the percentage saturation of the hemoglobin, that means the affinity of the hemoglobin for binding the oxygen would become low, and in which in a cases where the concentration of carbon dioxide is high. If carbon dioxide concentration is high, that means H plus, more H plus will be generated. If more H plus generated, the pH will become low and the temperature will increase. And if there is increase in diphosphoglycerate, so the percentage the affinity basically of the hemoglobin will decrease for the oxygen, and this oxyhemoglobin will dissociate to form heme and oxygen. If it shifts towards the left, it is in a condition when the carbon dioxide concentration is low and pH is high, just the vice versa. And if DPG is low and the temperature is low, it will favor, that means the affinity for hemoglobin, the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen binding would be high. So this will favor the forward reaction where it will lead to the formation of oxyhemoglobin. So if you see inside the lungs, where the partial pressure of oxygen is high and pressure of carbon dioxide is low, it favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. But while going into the tissues where the partial pressure is just 40, we see that the carbon dioxide concentration is high, and there this oxyhemoglobin breaks down into heme and releasing the oxygen for the process of respiration. So that is called as oxygen dissociation curve. This oxygen dissociation curve basically tells us how the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide take place. The oxygen which is moving as a oxyhemoglobin, it comes down into the tissues where it breaks down, and the oxyhemoglobin breaks down into heme and oxygen, so that the oxygen can be utilized for the process of respiration. And this is favored only on a condition when the concentration of carbon dioxide becomes high in the tissues. Now, the respiration can be regulated via two mechanisms. One is neural mechanism and second is chemoreceptor mechanisms. Neural mechanisms is controlled by the respiratory centers which are present in the pons varili and medulla oblongata. The pons varili has further divided into two centers, which is pneumotaxic center and apneustic center, which is present in the pons varili. Medulla, the respiratory center which is present in the medulla oblongata, has two centers, which is ventral respiratory center, which is responsible for forcible inspiration and expiration, whereas dorsal respiratory center is concerned for initiation of the inspiration. Now let us see how this mechanism works. When the pneumotaxic center, which is present in the pons varili, gets activated or switched on, it activates or signals apneustic center. This apneustic center will further signal dorsal center, and this dorsal center will give signals to through the phrenic nerve, and intercostal nerve will signal to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles respectively to contract and initiate the process of inspiration. After a few seconds, when the inspiration has occurred, this pneumotaxic center will be switched off and thus expiration will occur. Second mechanism is through chemoreceptor center receptors mechanism, where certain receptors are present in the aorta and carotid artery, the artery which is supplying the blood to the heart muscles, and in the medulla oblongata region also there is some chemoreceptors which are present, which can detect the presence of the gases, yes, and the acidity and the pH level, and getting those, when the receptors are activated, they will actually signal the medulla center, and if they are signaling the medulla center, it will initiate the process of inspiration. Now, even if all the mechanisms are going on properly, there are certain disorders which are occurring due to some or the other reason, and these disorders, the disorders which we will discuss is asthma. Asthma is due to the inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. If you remember the respiratory tract, we have trachea followed by the bronchi and the bronchioles. So when they are inflamed, they these actually, when they get inflamed, they become very thick, and the mucus which is secreted into these respiratory tracts, they they are secreted more than the normal, because of which there is obstruction in the flow of gases which is reaching the alveoli, hence the person feels difficulty in breathing. Whereas in emphysema, the alveolar walls are damaged. If the alveolar uh, from the bronchi to the bronchioles and then terminating into the alveolar walls where exchange of gases has to actually occur, these alveolar walls get damaged, which reduce the respiratory surface, or sometimes the air gets trapped into these fused alveoli of the lungs, which do not move into the blood vessels easily, and thus a person feels difficulty in breathing. Third is occupational respiratory disorders. In occupational respiratory disorders due to long-term exposure to the dust where a people is working there, due to which the the alveoli tissues is get inflamed, and there is scarring or fibrosis. That means scarring or fibrosis means the conversion of the normal muscular system into a stiff tissue. So when it becomes stiff, it becomes very difficult for the exchange of gas from the alveoli to the blood vessels, and thus the person feels there are certain reactions of allergic reactions, or they will find difficulty in breathing. This is the end of this chapter, and if you have any query regarding this chapter, please kindly comment on my kindly write to me in my comment box. Thank you.